One of the important principles that enable extensibility is the open-closed principle. Designs should be open for extension and closed for change. Open for extension means easy to extend, and yet they are not required to change when other components change. That is closed for change. If you remember from the previous slide, I said that you should not add code for features that are not required. And indeed, if you want to enable extensibility, you shouldn't add code for features that are not required, because usually you don't know what the actual requirements are. Instead, reorganize your code using the design's principles that we are discussing here to allow adding them in the future. So a fairly good measure of whether or not you are being extensible or not correctly is whether or not you are writing a lot of code in order to enable extension. The general idea should be, do not add code, just reorganize, maybe add a little, in order to be able to enable extensibility in the future, when the requirements are more known. And finally, the last principle is one that is being used in many different frameworks today, called the inversion of control. Actually, inversion of control is a name used in many different contexts. One principle that is described by an inversion of control is the Hollywood principle, which simply means, don't call us, we will call you. An example of don't call us, we will call you is the difference between a command line application, where the control is dictated by a sequence of operations in the main of the function, as opposed to a graphical application where the main simply iterates over a message loop and handles messages. And all of our code is actually event handlers that are being called as a reaction to user interface or interface that's coming in from various inputs. So this is a principle that is often used today. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a good design, but it's a principle that can be used to enable extensibility. And the other principle under the hood of inversion of control is very different. It's actually dependency injection. Dependency injection allows high-level modules to be highly configurable because they depend on abstractions and not on implementations. And if they depend on abstractions, they do not depend on other components. Rather, we can inject different implementations in different ways to the high-level module and change its dependencies dynamically. This reduces the coupling between the high-level modules and the low-level modules. So having reviewed some of these very, very high-level design principles, what is the motivation for design patterns? Most patterns address the issues of change in software. This makes them very important for designers to understand. Most patterns actually allow some part of a system to vary independently of another to allow testability, extensibility, and maintenance. And also, patterns provide a shared language among developers, so we often give a name to a concept which is well understood and also makes maintenance much easier because programmers understand the code in simple terms. Design patterns actually began many years ago, already in 1994, with a book which is considered the very Bible of design patterns by Eric Gummer, Richard Helm, Ralph Johnson, and John Villisides, commonly called the Gang of Four, who wrote a book called Design Patterns, Elements of Reusable Object-Oriented Software. These design patterns are only the basis of what we call design patterns today. But all design patterns are generally reusable solutions for recurring problems. And design patterns are intended to enable us in implementing the design principles that we have discussed. So to summarize, the greatest challenge of software design is change. Good design principles, as we have seen, and many more, address the challenge of change. And design patterns provide reusable guidelines for implementing these principles. I hope you have benefited from this short description of how we address the challenge of change in software. I would like to mention that we have in John Brys 3 different courses for different development environments, all of them discussing design patterns. You can see them here listed, and I invite you to look at the John Brys website to get more information about each of these design pattern courses. Thank you very much. Bye.